Happy Sabbath, church family. I'm in a bit of a different setting than I'm used to, but regardless, it's wonderful to be with all of you here this morning and to have the opportunity to share God's Word with you this morning. Even though we're in quarantine and even though we're separated, I'm just so thankful for technology and the fact that we're able to connect online like this. Thank you for tuning in every week to our website and to our Facebook page and to our YouTube and following along with all the messages. We want to just encourage you to continue to share and make sure that others who may not know or have access to our website and things like that, that you continue to help them to stay connected and be connected with us. I also want to encourage you, church family, to remain connected with each other. I encourage you to call each other, to video message each other, send emails, maybe even write a letter if that's what you're into, and if that's how you know how to do it. Whatever means of communication is most comfortable and best for you. We encourage you to stay connected. It's so important to stay connected in times like this. I've been calling and talking with my family in Virginia a lot. My mom, my dad, my sister. My mom in particular. Because being a mother, she always calls and worries about me and makes sure that I'm doing okay health-wise and I'm getting enough to eat. And so it's so nice to know that, she's out there caring for me and my sister and my father as well. And so I just encourage you, as a church community, as a church family, to continue to stay connected with each other as well. Pray for each other, encourage each other in these tough times. Now, speaking of my mother, I wanted to start off my message today actually by sharing a story, and rather not just necessarily a story, but a conversation that my mother and I had when I was a young child. And this was a conversation that really invoked a lot of self-reflecting in myself and the way that I thought and acted growing up as an individual. And so this conversation took place in a car as my mom was driving and I was sitting in the back seat. Now, as I was sitting in this car, I remember very distinctly, as we were leaving our neighborhood, I was complaining. I was whining. I was being a little baby. And the reason that I was complaining so much was because of not anything major or significant, but rather because I simply did not want to wear a new pair of shoes that my mom had bought me. Now, there's nothing wrong with this new pair of shoes that my mom had gotten for me. In fact, these shoes were very nice. They're very comfortable, great colors, looked really, really nice. And compared to my old shoes, which I'd been wearing for about almost 2 years at that time, they were much cleaner. My older shoes were falling apart. They were just in very, very bad condition. But again, I was complaining about having to wear this new pair of shoes. Not because the shoes were uncomfortable or anything like that, but simply because I did not like the idea of change. I did not like the fact that I had to go out of my comfort zone and switch from this previous pair of shoes, which I had found very comfortable and had loved up to that point, to wear this new, unknown pair of shoes. And so I was being ridiculous, obviously. And so my mom finally reached somewhat of a breaking point. And she said to me as she was driving, Paul, I love you, but something that really I just can't understand about you is why you're so overwhelmingly terrified of change. It's so difficult to do anything new with you. It's so difficult to get you to even wear a new pair of shoes because you're just so terrified of change. Whether you like it or not, Paul, change is a very, very important thing in our lives. And it's something that we as people can't avoid. One day you're going to have to go through change whether you like it or not. And so you need to learn to be able to accept change, to be able to take it for what it is. Now, looking back again at my younger self, I don't blame myself necessarily for being so terrified of change, because change itself is something that can be very, very scary. And being a young, very shy, timid boy, as many of you may know by now, anything that was scary, anything that was terrifying to me, I just avoided at all costs as a young boy. Now, growing older, I've obviously been able to overcome a lot of these fears, and maturing over the past 10 or so years, I've come to realize that change is something I welcome very much in my life now, and it's something that I actually actively seek out because I believe change is very important. And I've realized over time that what my mom said back then rang so true. Change is unavoidable and it's necessary in our lives. Now, change can be something that we choose proactively to do, something that I generally try to do now in my life. Change can also be something that we don't necessarily choose to do, but maybe a situation or unforeseen circumstance throws it upon us, and we just have to learn to adapt with it. Now, whether we choose to do it willingly or whether it's forced upon us, we as individuals and we collectively as humanity always have to go through change. And that's clearly shown in the Bible. In the Bible, we see many individuals who went through change, willingly and unwillingly. We also see many people, specifically the nation of Israel, that had to undergo change as well. And today, I want to look at a specific verse in the Bible which details a story of change for the Israelites. Specifically, I want to look at Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. And so you can follow along at home in your Bibles. Come with me to Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. We can also hopefully have the words on the screen for you. So Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or tremble at them, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. To fully understand what this passage, what this verse is saying, we have to first understand the context of the story in which this verse is taking place. So in Deuteronomy chapter 31, we see that the Israelites are undergoing a major season of change. Specifically, they're undergoing a change in leadership. Now, Moses had been leading the Israelites for many, many years. He had taken them out of captivity, out of slavery from Egypt and Pharaoh. He had led them to the Mount Sinai. He had given them the 10 Commandments and the various laws that God had given to them. And he had led them through the desert wilderness for 40 years. And now as the Israelites were finally coming closer and closer to the border of Canaan, to the promised land, we see that Moses is now beginning to get to the close and the end of his leadership. In fact, in verses 1 through 3, at the beginning of this chapter, we see that Moses addresses the Israelite people. And in addressing them, he tells them that he is now at the age of 120 years old. And that God had given him a message saying that he would not be leading the people anymore. Moses would not be taking the people across the Jordan River into the promised land of Canaan. Rather, it would be God and his newly appointed leader and servant, Joshua, that would be doing so. And so, with Moses' leadership and life starting to come to an end, Moses decides that it's time to give the Israelites his final commands, his final message, his final directions for them to follow as they're undergoing this season of change. And so we get back here to Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6, one of many commandments that Moses gave to the people. And I wanted to start with this and break it down into a couple sections. We see that in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6, Moses begins with the command, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Now there's so much to break down within this section of these two words, strong and courageous. So let's start with the word strong. When I think of this word strong, when I think of strength in general, I usually think of it in two contexts. The first context that I think of when it comes to strength is physical strength. That is me going to the gym, me exercising, getting stronger. I got a gym membership back in 2018, and over the past couple years of moderately consistent exercise, I've realized that I've grown a lot stronger. I can lift heavier weights, I can do more push-ups, and more squats, and a variety of other physical activities a lot better than I could before. And so that's physical strength, growing stronger physically. Now, the second context that I usually think of when it comes to strength is this idea of mental strength. Now, mental strength is this idea that one, in their mindset, in their mind, is constantly able to maintain high levels of discipline, confidence, being able to achieve goals, to not be lazy, to be able to do and set out and achieve whatever goals you've set for yourself. That's what I think of when I think of mental strength. Being able to overcome difficulties and trials, to not give up, to not give in. This is what mental strength is. And so generally, again, I think of strength in terms of physical strength and mental strength. And so what was Moses talking about here when he tells the people to be strong? Was he suggesting that they need to exercise and be physically stronger? Or was he telling them to grow themselves mentally, to become more mentally strong, to fortify their minds against the trials and tribulations to come? Possibly. But when we look at this word strong, used in the original language, we see that it's interestingly used in another context, in another story. And that is the story of Moses and Pharaoh. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the story of Moses and Pharaoh, you may be familiar with the phrase, hardening of the heart. Specifically, Pharaoh hardens his heart. Now, when it says that Pharaoh hardens his heart, the word that's used there to describe the hardening of his heart is the same exact word that Moses uses in his command to the people to be strong. And so in the context of Moses and Pharaoh, what exactly did it mean when Pharaoh hardened his heart? When we look at the story, we see that in hardening his heart, Pharaoh chose to not listen to the commands, the teachings that Moses was giving to him from God, but rather he chose to stay firm in his own beliefs, in his own ways, in his own customs instead. And so in a similar manner, we can see in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6, that the same principle is being applied. Just as Pharaoh was firm and hard in his beliefs, Moses is now encouraging the people in a spiritual sense to make sure that as they venture out into these new lands, as they go into this foreign territory without him, the leader that had led them out of all these things before, the Israelites had to remember to stay firm to the beliefs, to the teachings, to the commandments that God had given to Moses, through Moses, to the people. We can see this being affirmed in the previous verse, verse 5, in the second half, when Moses tells the people, "You shall do to them according to all the commandments which I have commanded you." So while strength does have this physical aspect, and while it does have this mental aspect, we can see in this specific story, in this specific word, that Moses is talking about a spiritual strength, remaining firm, remaining steadfast in their faith, in their beliefs, and the teachings and the commandments that God had given to them. We see then, next, that after commanding them to be strong, Moses now commands the people, the Israelites, to be courageous. This word courageous, as used in this immediate context, generally means to be strong and alert, and it talks about it in terms of one's mind, to be undaunted, to be unafraid of things mentally. And so, as we previously mentioned, now that Moses has encouraged people to stay strong spiritually, we see that he is reaffirming and assuring the people and commanding them to stay strong mentally. When I think about mental fortitude, I think about my father. I always looked up to my father for many different reasons, but in particular, I always admired my father for his mental fortitude. Whenever my father was set with challenges, whenever there was a task or anything ahead of him that he had to accomplish, my father had stronger mental fortitude and stronger mental strength than anyone else I've ever met in my life, particularly when it came to sports. I remember my father was so successful in sports, even though physically he wasn't very imposing. In fact, he's very, very small. I'm about 6 foot, uh, 6 feet tall, and my father is about 5 foot 6 inches tall. So he's not a very tall man. He is very strong and was physically well built, but he wasn't very imposing. Yet, whenever my father played sports, or whenever he had a challenge ahead of him that he needed to take on, my father was almost always able to win and achieve victory. Not again because of the way he was or his talents, but simply because of his powerful mindset. My father wasn't arrogant. He wasn't narcissistic. He didn't think he was better than anyone. My father simply believed in the one fact that he was a human and other people are humans. Therefore, with everyone being a human, he was just as capable of achieving and doing things that others around him, who were maybe taller and stronger, yet he could do the same things that they could. As a result, I remember growing up and watching my father win countless tournaments when it came to sports. He had hundreds and hundreds of trophies, which you can see a few of them in the pictures that we show you. And I remember he had so many trophies to the point where my sister and I would play with them and they would break. And he wouldn't really care. He would just throw them away because he had so many. He was almost always voted the most valuable player on the team. He was either the gross champion or second place, or was winning some sort of accolade when it came to things like golf and soccer. And the success that he found in sports was very much often replicated when it came to his business, when it came to his relationships, his personal life. He was powerfully motivated. He was unwilling to ever give up. He was so consistent in his achievements and the things that he was able to do because of his powerful mindset, because he was able to have that competitive drive, that edge in his mind, where even if things got tough, even if things got difficult, he was able to push on, achieve, and succeed. Moses, in this story, is encouraging the Israelites to adopt somewhat of a similar mindset, to have mental strength. Because Moses knew, through God, the Israelites were going to encounter many, many difficult situations. He was challenging the Israelites to be strong because he knew of the future that was to come. He knew that the Israelites would fall short. He knew that they would do things, commit sins such as adultery, idolatry. He knew that they would be in many wars, that they would be overrun by various nations, that they would even go into exile and have their temple city destroyed. Moses knew that the Israelites were going to be going through all these things, and he knew that the Israelites needed to remain strong. They needed to remain firm, not just spiritually, but mentally as they were going through all these things. And so he challenges them. He tells them. He commands the people to be courageous, to not give up, to stay strong mentally. He reaffirms this even in his next command, telling the Israelites to not be afraid or tremble at them. These words, afraid and tremble, that are being used here, imply such a dreadfully horrifying and scary situation or state, and fear that a person literally shakes when they think about it or experience it. I remember experiencing something like that when I was in Jerusalem back in 2014. 2014 in Jerusalem, I remember there was a time, a few occasions actually, where I watched missiles getting blown out of the sky. Now, the first time this happened, it was such a terrifyingly awe-inspiring experience. I remember it in such vivid detail because of the feelings that were going through my body. I wasn't panicking or anything like that per se, but I just do remember after everything had gone down, after the tremors of the earth and the boom and the thud of the explosions had gone and passed, that I was sitting in a room alone and I could feel my heart thumping in my chest. And I looked down at my hands and I could see them shaking. Even though I wasn't feeling necessarily fear, my body was just reacting in such a way that I was like, man, that was such a terrifying situation when I think about it. And this is just a very, very small example of the fear, the trembling that God knew the Israelites would be going through in the future. And yet, it's so amazing because even though God knew the terrible fears, the trials, the different changes in the circumstances that the Israelites would be going through, God ends this message through Moses with a message of encouragement, and a message of hope. He says through Moses, despite all of these terrible things, he will not fail you or forsake you. Again, he will not fail you or forsake you. When I read this, he will not fail you or forsake you, I'm filled with such hope. I'm filled with security. Because over my lifetime, and I'm sure over all of your lifetimes, we all have experienced moments in which people have failed us. People have fallen short. Promises were not kept. People abandoned us. They left us, betrayed us. And maybe we have even done the same to others. But the amazing thing about God, our God in heaven, is that while everyone else falls short, while everyone else may fail to keep their promises and fail to meet expectations that we have for them, God never fails. God is always with us. God is constant. He does not ever fail us. He does not forsake us. Just as he promised the Israelites that he would cross ahead of them through the Jordan into these foreign lands to conquer the people and prepare the land for the Israelites, God too travels ahead of us now. He crosses ahead of the trials, the difficulties, the hardships, the change that we sometimes don't see, that life throws at us in our lives. As I previously shared with you, as a young child, I was someone who really, really did not like change. Now, having grown up as an adult now, change is something that I welcome. In fact, it's something that I seek out somewhat regularly in my life because I realize and I recognize just how important change is in shaping and improving who I am as a human being. However, even with this new mindset that I have, even being so adjusted to the idea of change, I still find it very hard to process just how much change we as a world have gone through over the past few months in the year 2020, in this new decade. It amazes me how in such a short period of time, our world can change and shift so much. If anyone had told me, even a month ago, that I would be preaching from my bedroom, that we wouldn't be meeting regularly at church, that we would be isolated and quarantined with our families in our homes, in our apartments, I wouldn't have believed you at all. I would have said, maybe in other parts of the world, but I think we're fine here. We'll do okay. Yet, the reality is, this is the situation we're in now. These are the circumstances, the change in our lives we didn't ask for, but unfortunately, they've come to us. And during this time of change, during these times where people are having to readjust, to reassess, to refigure out how to live life, how to go about our day by day, what struck me is, or what's impacted me or struck me, is the reaction that people have had due to these unforeseen circumstances. Reactions particularly involving fear, panic. It's amazing how over the past few weeks I've found it pretty hard, although I think it's gotten a little better now, to find just basic things that I used to buy and take for granted before. Certain food items like rice and for a little while drinking water, struggling to find soap and things like toilet paper and paper towels. There are so many people panic buying, fear buying, and causing others to react in fear as well. And when I think about this passage that we just went through and the command that Moses gave us to be strong, to be courageous, to not be afraid, to not tremble, and to trust in our Lord. It makes me very sad to see what's happening. Yet at the same time, I'm hopeful. Because even though there are videos of people fighting over toilet paper in stores and videos of people flooding into grocery stores early in the morning and buying everything out in the first minute, there are also people out there and positive stories out there that encourage hope, that show kindness, that show the teachings of Christ in our lives. There are people helping those who are elderly and unable to go out. There are those helping people like that buy groceries and their basic necessities. There's a news story about a man who went out with a sign saying, "Share toilet paper." And he not only received toilet paper from others, but he then shared it with others who needed it as well, who were driving by. There are so many positive stories where I see the love of Christ, this strength, this courage, this trust in God, that gives me hope for the future. That gives me hope that Christ and his teachings will never die, that they'll never fail, and that there are many people who will choose to live in strength, who will choose to live with courage rather than live with fear. Now, it's very important that I be clear. I am not suggesting that this current situation that we're living in isn't something that we as a community, as a church, and as a world shouldn't be taking seriously. I'm not saying that we should ignore what's happening. I'm not saying that we should be complacent and just lazy and not care about what's going on. But at the same time, we as a church, we as a community, we as a world must remember that we cannot overreact. We have to find a balance. As all things in life must be balanced. Just as we should not be lazy, careless, apathetic towards this situation that's occurring, we should not allow ourselves to be dominated at the same time by fear, by panic, by chaos. In the midst of all of this going on, we must become people who inspire hope, who inspire love, who inspire the teachings of Christ to the world around us. And so, as we are approaching and as we are in the midst of these times of change, I just want to let you know, Paradise Valley Church family, that this isn't going to end anytime soon. In fact, our lives are going to be impacted and changed by what's been going on for many, many years to come. Even if, and hopefully, all of this ends and goes away, we as a world will continue to live differently, act differently, and think differently because of the past few months that we've experienced. The world is and will forever be changed. And so in the midst of all this change, I want to pray, and I want to encourage you all, church family, today, to remember the words that Moses shared with the Israelites when they too were undergoing a season of change that they did not expect, that they did not think would happen, but came upon them anyways. I challenge all of us and pray for all of us this morning to be brave, to be strong, to be courageous, to not be overcome by fear and trembling, and to trust knowing that our God is faithful, our God is eternal. He will not forsake us. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or tremble at them, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you.